I now want to turn to the topic that topic around the Brisbane airspace. It was something we covered with the department, which I'm sure you're very, very aware of. Has the temporary consultative committee with the Brisbane community concerned about noise from the Brisbane airport stopped as a result of you handing your report to the Minister in December?
I'll ask Mr Curran to answer that.
Thank you. Senator, I don't understand the question. The temporary... could you ask the question again? Sorry.
The consultative committee you had with the community affected and impacted. There was a temporary forum?
Yes.
Yes? Is that still in... is that still running?
Senator, I'm just wanting to understand, you're referring to BAPAF, the Brisbane Airport Post-Implementation Review Advisory Forum?
I'm talking about the forum that was set up before you've had, like whilst you were conducting the PIR,
yes,
which has been completed, as I understand. Is the forum still running?
Yeah, thank you, Senator.
Because the department said this morning that it had stopped,
yes,
awaiting the setting up of a permanent consultative committee.
Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to be clear, there's a number
I'm
of
sure you
forums.
will have seen the evidence given by the department this morning, Mr Curran, or someone in your section should have made you aware of it.
I did, Senator, thank you.
Right.
The Brisbane Airport Post-Implementation Review Advisory Forum that was set up in September of 2021, I believe handed in its final report in December of last year and is no longer stood up in its place, or not in its place, but it continuing by way of a community forum is the BACAG forum, which I believe was also mentioned this morning by the department. Airservices is continuing to engage with that forum, and we are aware that the department are working with the Minister's Office around the establishment of a permanent community noise forum.
So when do you envisage that permanent forum to be stood up?
Senator, I can't answer that question. It's a matter for the department and the Minister's Office. We're not involved in that decision making.
Do you have a suggestion? Do you have any advice for the Minister, given you're getting all the stick?
Senator, I don't think I'm in a position to give advice to the Minister on that, but we can continue to engage with the community through that BACAG forum that I just mentioned and through direct mechanisms which we would normally engage the community with.
When are you next engaging with the BACAG?
BACAG meet quarterly. They have a terms of reference that are independently chaired by, in fact, a member of the former BAPAF group that we just referred to. They have terms of reference that include representatives for all of the members of the House of Representatives that are immediately adjacent to Brisbane Airport and extends out to 30 kilometres from Brisbane Airport, as well as a range of residents' associations that are typically immediately adjacent to the airport. We meet with that and provide that forum and update on a quarterly basis.
You'd obviously be supportive of any consultative committee that the government set up to address this issue?
Yes, Senator.
And be full participants in that? Yes?
As appropriately determined by the government, yes.
Why did Airservices only provide a workshop on the implementation review after Henry Pike, the member for Bowman, which covers Redland City, requested it, despite the fact that the proposed changes to flight paths over Redlands were a significant aspect of the review?
Senator, I have to take the specifics of that question on notice. I am aware of a number of meetings with residents in the Redland Shire as well as with the member for Bowman. The exact timing of that I would have to take on notice.
When was the workshop?
We had a number of workshops, Senator. We did.
Just let me know the dates.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yep. We did workshops associated with the post-implementation review terms of reference in late 2021, and then we undertook 9 post-implementation review workshops in September 2022. There was also a series of workshops that were undertaken by an entity called Trax International that were contracted as an independent consultant to review the post-implementation review, and they undertook a range of community workshops during July of 2022 also.
Was there any consultation with Bayside residents of Redlands prior to SODPROP's trial? being implemented?
Senator, I think the answer to that may be no, and I would need to take that on notice to confirm, though, but I believe the answer is no.
I'd like to know why.
And as I say, I believe the answer is no. I would need to take that on notice. I understand that part of the engagement with the community was initially focused around the areas that were immediately impacted with the implementation of the new flight paths in Brisbane. And as the post-implementation review proposal evolved and additional work on SODPROPs over the bay operations became an option, the implications for broader Brisbane residents, as in Redland residents, which are further afield, became apparent, and we then subsequently undertook engagement.
Thank you. I'll have more questions on notice on that. I have some questions to put to you from the Brisbane Flight Path Community Alliance. Is there a sense within Airservices Australia that certain Brisbane communities, inner city Brisbane communities, should be perform a buffering capacity for the rest of the East Coast at expense of their amenity, livability, health and wellbeing?
No, Senator.
That is not the view of Airservices Australia?
No, it is not.
Do you accept that that is the perspective of the community that is suffering from the impact of this air path noise?
Yes, I do, Senator.
And are the solutions all in the PIR?
Working through and balancing all with the community, etc. The post-implementation review is to take that into account and the noise action plan as a result. And
is obviously community consultation is an important part of that.
Correct.
You're prepared to meet with the community?
Yes.
It seems the Minister isn't. Did you know that?
I am aware that the Minister advised that she was not meeting with members of the community.
Assistant Minister, do you think that's acceptable community consultation from the Minister? You've been sitting here listening to not just the Coalition but the Greens put forward the impact of these flight paths on these affected communities. Do you think a responsible Minister should actually meet with the community?
The government is and understands the angst caused by airport developments in Brisbane, and as has been discussed earlier and just here a few minutes ago, we're in the later stages of forming a permanent community noise consultation body, and that will be formed in the coming months. All details.
What precisely does Airservices mean by, and they quote, the management of community and political responses? Please provide some candid and frank examples to illustrate this. And I'm assuming they're quoting from, directly from Airservices Australia communication or the report.
Senator, I'm not familiar with the quote. I would have to take that on.
All right,
notice.
I will go back and ask for further details on that, but I would appreciate when I do on notice some frank and candid examples. The document says, and they quote, as evidence both internationally and within Australia, increased public pressure has resulted in operational restrictions at various airports. Yet this is, and close quote, yet this is exactly what Brisbane communities want Airservices to do: implement net movement reductions, which brings about actual noise reductions. How does Airservices reconcile its industry key messages with Airservices' own community engagement framework, which promises meaningful, transparent engagement with community?
Senator, in terms of striking that balance between community and industry outcomes, and I think your reference there was specifically in relation to, was it suppression of demand? Was that?
Yep.
It is the case when a master development plan, or a major development proposal such as has gone through for the Brisbane new parallel runway, that there's a forecast that's submitted as a part of that process for the growth, which is obviously linked to the necessity for the investment in the additional runway. That forecast is something that Airservices is, I beg your pardon, that forecast is a part of the process that's submitted through and approved by the relevant minister or ministers. And then Airservices is latterly engaged in the process of designing airspace to accommodate that forecast growth. It wouldn't be for Airservices to intervene after there's been an approval from the appropriate ministers to suppress that growth. What we try to do and seek to do is to design airspace and flight paths that minimise the impact on communities and the environment to accommodate that growth.
Well, this community alliance feels that Airservices has lied to the Brisbane community previously. They believe the behaviour's been unethical. They're wanting to know, they feel the behaviour that put them in this situation is being repeated again. This is direct responses from them. What would you say to these community members and this alliance if they were before you and putting their claims that Airservices Australia has found yet again to be blatantly lying to communities around, again, the parallel runway, etc., and the conversations you were having with community back then and seem to still be having? I think part of the issue relates to the obligations under the Airservices Act to protect communities from the effects and association with the operation and use of aircraft. Now, I notice you're nodding, so I would really appreciate your response.
Senator, thank you. This is the Brisbane Flight Path Community Alliance you're referring to, BFPCA. Yes. So we have engaged with the chair and previous chairs of the BFPCA since its inception. I beg your pardon, I seem to be losing the microphone. Since its inception, the previous chair was Mr David Diamond, and our head of community engagement had a number of face-to-face meetings as well as email telephone exchanges with the chair of BFPCA to do primarily three things: understand BFPCA's perspective, try to better explain the process Airservices was going through, and to establish an arrangement, if you will, whereby they would communicate to their members around key workshops and releases of information which Airservices was placing on our website from time to time.
Talking points.
No, I'm talking about, for example, the last contact that we had with the now current chair, Mr Marcus Foth of BFPCA, was on the 12th of December via a text exchange to notify the chair of BFPCA that we were putting the post-implementation review report live on our website with the intent that they would then engage with their members to keep them abreast of that update. We've tried to engage with them to have a constructive dialogue. I think it's also important to add that it's not the case that there's a single view from communities and community groups across Brisbane by any stretch of the imagination. There's a number of groups, from BFPCA to a recently formed group, the Redlanders Against Diversions and Amenity Reductions, RADAR, another group, the Sanford Area Aircraft Action Group. They all have differing views, and Airservices is, through its consultation, trying to understand those views, trying to understand how we can better balance those with our obligations around community, industry and environment.
I just want to go to a Quan follow-up from October, November, marketing, promotion and communication for workshops. The question asked for the expenditure and copies of all advertisements around the workshops. You said you had several in Redlands in September, was it?
Workshops?
Anyway, irrespective of the month they were held, the answer confirms that zero budget was spent on advertising the PIR workshops, and instead Airservices relied on the community to spread the information via word of mouth. Why didn't Airservices Australia deem it necessary to spend substantial money on PR communication to, if you like, get the community out and engaged?
Senator, the approach that we took was really fivefold. And if it's appropriate, I'll run through a very high level of what the 5 key pillars of that approach was, and then perhaps into more detail as you wish. But the engagement strategy broadly rested around a number of undertakings that Airservices did itself via our Engage website and via engaging traditional media through interviews and the like, which we did not have to pay for. The second part of the community engagement was obviously, I beg your pardon, Airservices also undertook a range of workshops, etc. We also then had the Tracks International consultation process where they engaged the community through a series of workshops, which I touched on earlier tonight. The third part of community engagement was that BACAG group that I mentioned before, which is a long-established frame that already has linkages into a range of communities within 30 kilometres of the Brisbane airport through elected officials at state, City Council and federal level. The third one was the BAPAF frame, which was an important body that was established, as I think you're aware, to inform the Airservices PIR, and part of its terms of reference were in fact directly to offer a broad Brisbane community perspective on aircraft noise and our post-implementation review. We met with BAPAF on 8 occasions to seek to understand what they were learning through their engagement with the Brisbane community. They published their reports on a quarterly basis on the Department of Infrastructure's website. And for example, I think it was in the first report, they had more than 365 submissions from community members. So we got a very strong input there from BAPAF. And the final one was engaging directly with these community groups and associations, as I've just touched on, whether that's the Pink and Bar Residents Association or BFPCA or the group in Sanford. And so we were able to tried to work with some of those community groups to get the message out around our workshops and around key moments as we went through the post-implementation review.
You might have saved a few bucks, Mr. Curran. Would you do anything different now, knowing what you know now?
Senator, I think there are definitely aspects that we can take learnings from this.
And what would they be?
Well, Senator, more broadly, I think that we would probably said about the third-party assurance frame earlier on in the process. The use of Tracks International was something that we consistently got positive feedback from community. I think it's fair to say Airservices had a trust deficit with the community at the commencement of the post-implementation review. That third-party assurance model was extremely helpful. We got that feedback directly from the community. We got it from BAPAF. We also got it from other stakeholders as we engaged them. It's probably a key point. Another element would be our flight path design principles, perhaps to place those more at the forefront of some of the dialogue that we had with community groups.
So better consultation?
Senator, I think we did extensive consultation.
So
it doesn't
no
mean
regrets.
that
I'm not understanding,
I
Mr. Curran. Like, I get all the emails I'm sure Minister King gets.
Yep.
And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of residents extremely concerned, health and wellbeing, a whole raft of issues, not to mention, feeling like they've been excluded from a government process. I'm still unclear after listening to your evidence whether you got it right, no regrets, or whether you would actually do something different when it comes to dealing with these community members who have legitimate concerns.
Senator, I think one of the challenges with community engagement, we find it in Brisbane, we find it in every other location that we deal with, is the outcomes of it are very subjective. And so it's always the case that there will be some in the community who view the activities favourably and others who will view them less favourably. I think that broadly we got it right. The consultation has been extensive, and the use of those 5 points to support and augment our consultation has been extremely extremely helpful in informing what is now a very robust post-implementation review and a thorough noise action plan for how we can invest in improvements in Brisbane over the next 1, 2, 3 years.
Mr Harfield, have you learnt anything for the organisation to consult better with communities from this affair?
Yes, Senator, and one of the things that we are undertaking as a result of the Brisbane new parallel runway and even the post-implementation review is we're about to start consultation on a community consultation standard so that everyone can understand of what can be expected and what not, and we will go through that and have that worked through the community, and we'll use that as the standard that we'll be judged by.
Much better. I've got a year-to-year comparison of Brisbane aircraft noise complaint data, which has seen complaints skyrocket over the Labor Party's first 5 months in government. Can you confirm those numbers?
Those numbers are correct because they come from a question on notice. Senator, I've got something here to table which takes the complaints month by month from the start of the Brisbane parallel runway all through to January, as well as the number of complainants per month, as well as the number of movements per month.
Thank you.
Because with the, and if I could table that, and I've made some copies. So. Is
there a policy internally to deal with repeat complainants?
I
know some Senate committees have processes to deal with when we get form letters, which is 3,000 submissions, but 2,500 of them were the same letter from a generated website. Do you have an internal policy to deal with repeat complainants?
I'll have Mr Curran may be able to give a bit more detail, but normally if it is the same complaint repeated by the same complainant, we will treat that as one complaint rather than if it's 10 of the same thing over and over again, it will be treated as one complaint.
Because they're still being woken up at 5 a.m. when the baby's awake and the dog's barking.
But if it's something different, we'll take that as a separate complaint.
Right.
But we track them all, so in other words...
On notice, I would like to understand of the complaints, with the numbers we've got in front of us, how many are your repeat complainants versus individual complaints?
Different ones.
Because that would tend to suggest to me there is a lot more complaints than what's actually been reported. If we're going to take the time it took somebody to pick up the phone or write the email, just because it's from the same person about noise, shouldn't actually disqualify it from being counted as a complaint.
Senator, we can certainly take that on notice. Perhaps just to clarify, if I may, the only time we wouldn't count the complaint as an additional complaint if it was about the very same flight, to call and complain about the same flight again, perhaps immediately thereafter. Then that is not.
Or 6 months later. I appreciate that. Thank you. If you could take that on notice. Thank you. Thank you so much. Just wondering if you've recently engaged a consultant to assist with advertising.
Senator, you've more information?
Okay, I've asked other agencies in the department, what's your line item spend on consultants?
Paul, you got that?
On consultants or on advertising?
On consultants.
On consultants for financial year 22-23, about $10.8 million.
$10.8 million. On what?
On what? On a range of subjects, Senator.
Right. Tell me.
So ranging from business sustainment programs as we worked our way through COVID.
No, that was this financial year.
In some cases this financial year, yes, Senator.
I thought the $10 million was for this financial year.
I'm just trying to split it up into
Sorry,
those.
Mr Logan, can I have clarity? when you answered my question, you said for this financial year to date, you've spent over $10 million on consultants.
$8 million.
8?
10.8.
$10.8 million this financial year.
Yes, Senator.
And it's on responding to COVID.
No, Senator, I'm just trying to work out the breakdown. So in some cases it is our continuing response to COVID in terms of our ongoing restructuring of the organisation as we're working, continuing to restructure the organisation. So in some cases it's included an enabling services transformation where we're restructuring the back office of the organisation, and we're working through the implementation of a new enterprise resource planning tool. In other cases, we've had consultants working with us on information management, which is more on the front end of the operational side of the organisation.
All right, in the interests of time, on notice, I'll ask you to break all of that $10.8 million down, please.
Sure.
I'd also like to know how long you've been working on your restructure and when you want to see that complete. Have you spent any money on advertising?
Just give me a moment, Senator. So we would have spent money on advertising related to our recruitment activities, Senator. I don't have the specifics on it. We spent this financial year about $346,000 on a range of activities that run. I don't have the details specifically, Senator, but we can provide them on notice.
Okay. Were any of it, how much did it cost you to do the Connecting Australians to What Matters to Them campaign?
I'd need to get that specifically, Senator. I don't have that broken out.
Mr Curran?
Senator, I'm not
Do you
familiar
know
with that.
about this campaign, Mr Harfield?
I do know about the campaign.
Okay, how much did it cost?
I don't know how much it cost. We'll get that onto you on notice.
So tell us very quickly why Airservices Australia felt they needed to do a campaign around connecting Australians to what matters to them.
The reason that we battled it is that fostering the growth and understanding and coming out of COVID, what it was that actually matters as we continue to prepare for the continued growth that's occurring. The fact that one of the things is that there is a want for people to travel, and we've got to make sure that we're in front to respond to that, Senator. There is an upside to aviation, not just the downside of just aircraft noise.
Isn't that the responsibility of the airlines themselves? Why is that Airservices Australia's responsibility?
The airlines will look at it specifically for their particular reason, but our obligation is to all airspace. One of our requirements under our Act, our actual second function, is to foster and promote civil aviation inside and outside Australia.
So this was a survey though, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. To give us an indication.
Where was this campaign run?
It was run across a number of locations. We'll give you exactly where the spread of the 1,000 people that were interviewed or surveyed.
How did they access the survey?
I have to take that on notice.
Mr Curran or Mr Logan?
Senator, I'm unable to add any more.
I understand. I can tell you what people wanted at post-COVID. They wanted their luggage to arrive with them when they did, and they wanted their planes to leave on time and land on time. I'm not sure. Can people who signed up to this, and my understanding is that it was predominantly in certain newspapers and online news outlets, can people be very confident about the data? What did you do with the data of people who actually did the survey?
I have to take that on notice, Senator, but it would be kept confidential.
You won't have sold it to a third party,
No, Senator. Not at all.
de-identified?
Not even de-identified.
Okay, excellent. If you could answer those questions on notice, I would appreciate it. And just finally, some questions on your board. Are you able to confirm that the quorum for your board is 5 members?
Yes, Senator.
Have there been any meetings of the board where quorum has not been able to be achieved?
No, Senator.
Not even due to conflicts of interest?
No, Senator.
Are there any vacancies?
There is one vacancy
How long has that been vacant?
since December.
December. Has Airservices Australia provided the Minister with skills matrix and appropriate names?
We've traditionally and in the process of the current vacancy, but previously we've provided school matrix and potential recommendations.
So if the board, was it a snap resignation?
Term expiry, Senator.
Term expired, so you knew it was coming.
Correct.
So when did you send the information to the department or the minister?
We would have requested that before.
Absolutely. How
Yes.
long before? What is your
I have to
typical
take that on
process?
notice because
Mr. Curran knows. He's the one that's probably had to say to someone, get that brief up.
Senator, unfortunately, I
You
don't.
don't know? Is it a couple of months?
I'd have to take it on notice because it would be normally handled through the chair.
Okay. I'd appreciate that. And have you heard back from the minister on the appointment?
Not the vacancy as yet, Senator.
Okay. When do you anticipate that to happen?
At the minister's pleasure.
Of course. I understood there were 2 vacancies. Have you recently filled one?
Correct.
Can you just...
The previous incumbent, Anne Brown, was reappointed.
Okay. Right. And did the minister approve that reappointment?
Yes, Senator.
When did she reapprove that?
Earlier this month, last month, we'll be in January.
In January. And did her term expire at the same time as...
Correct. So we had a gap of a few weeks.
Right. But so the brief that you're going to get back to me on notice would have had both terms expiring,
Correct.
and the other person didn't want to be reappointed?
That's not my understanding, Senator.
So they did want to be reappointed,
My understanding was they were.
but only Ms Brown got reappointed by the minister.
That's correct.
Righto, more to go with this one as well.